Hello, my name is Kraus, and I'm a veteran member of the Star Trek Online DPS community. Um, so, I'm making this video to try to explain the concept of how ships shouldn't be necessarily purchased because of their stats, but rather the extras that are provided with the ship. So, an extra can be you know, equated to like a trait or a console or a hanger pet and not necessarily the, numerical or visual aspects of the ship. So a numerical aspect would be like the number of consoles, weapons, or bridge officer slots in the order of the bridge officer slots, and even the specialization of the ship. My whole argument that I've made recently is that those elements don't really matter as much as long as the ship follows very specific uh, criteria for the build type that you want to do. So a good example of this is like a cannon scatter volley build. A cannon scatter volley build will require you to slot, cannon scatter volley 2 or 3. The meta right now would be to have, you know, several unconventional systems procs. You have your emergency power to weapons and engines. You could go a step further, and depending upon your specialization, you have like intel with override subsystem safeties. You'd have, you know, uh, basically just that. Um, and I wanted to basically show that there's a large selection of ships, and some of them may not look good on paper, but more or less the same generic build can be applied to all of them. So here, I have the legendary D7. Now, I don't think many people think about the legendary D7 on a daily basis. It's a fairly unordinary ship. Um, it's just a 5-3 battle cruiser, and it has Intel primary and Miracle Worker secondary. And Miracle Worker is not necessarily the best secondary, and Intel is not necessarily the best primary. Usually, you want the other way around for these super high-end meta ships. Another similar ship is like the Shrike. It's an okay ship, um, but I have a build idea here that I think people will find interesting, where I neither use all of the isomag, or I neither use all of the engineering and universal slots for isomags, nor do I even touch the Miracle Worker seating at all. Um, and it really aligns with how I build a lot of my ships. So I think if I walk through how I gear the ship up first, people might get a little bit of a uh, perspective on that. Um, I have a very different way of thinking versus other players, I believe. So as you can see, like I haven't even upgraded this ship T6X2. Uh, haven't even really thought about the ship in a few years, but I looked at it a bit a while ago, and I found some interesting situations that might make this ship stand out in ways that you may not have considered. Let me upgrade the ship to T6X2 first, and then we can get started. Uh, so now that it's T6X2, I'm going to try to go through, and I'm basically just going to create a fairly standard plasma CSV build. The ship's actually notable for being a good surgical strikes platform, but I don't really like like to use surgical strikes in the type of content that I play, which is mainly Pug ISCs. But yeah, let's get started. So for the 4 weapon slots, this is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to use plasma DHCs. I could use other types of dual cannons or dual heavy cannons. Um, even within plasma, I could use ultimates, I could use isolytics, but I just want to use plasmas because they're just a fairly vanilla choice. Uh, and there's not really a big difference between plasmas and ultimates. And I'll do the alt weapons next. I mean the alt apt weapons next. This is also fairly straightforward. You usually want to use the plasmatic biomatter auto turret in these types of builds because they give you more complex plasma fire procs. If you don't have it, it's not the end of the world. Um, and you always want to use the Pav and Omni, which is a higher damaging apt weapon due to its secondary effect. Uh, it just does a lot of good damage with AoE weapons. Um, so for your deflector, impulse, warp, and shields, this is very cookie cutter. It's very little deviation in most DPS builds. For the deflector, I'm just going to use the colony deflector. For the impulse, I'm not going to use the competitive engines. I find that I don't like competitive engines on higher turn rate ships, and the legendary D7 has a turn rate of 12, I believe. Let me just look that up. Yeah, it's got a turn rate of 12. So for this kind of setup, I'm going to go with the Discovery engines, which are usually like the other top engines people use for the 3-piece. And because I'm going for the 3-piece, I just go with the Discovery Warp Core and the Discovery Shields. So next up would be the console layout. Now I'm going to uh, not use a lot of isomags. Like you can use as many isomags as you want. My build philosophy recently has been to use like 4 or 5 isomags because I have a lot of FOMO or lockbox uh, consoles. So like I like to explain to people like the ship choice doesn't really matter, but like you should be getting ships that like give you more nice to have or like meta consoles and traits. So that's definitely going to play it into effect here because Star Trek Online is a very pay to win game. So I'm going to take some of my plasma isomags and I'm just going to throw them on the ship. And I'm going to go with 4 of them. Next up, I'm going to tackle my tack slot, and that's going to be the Valkyrie Torment engine. It's a very standard choice to use for a plasma build because it provides some extra damage for complex plasma fires, and it also provides plasma damage for your weapons. Um, so the rest of these slots, apart from one, are going to be dedicated to universal consoles. This is a very meta thing right now with how powerful universal consoles are right now, and they've been fairly powerful for the past like 4 years, or ever since unconventional systems has come out. So I'm gonna go through my consoles, and I'm just gonna name some off. So I'm gonna use DPRM. DPRM has been a meta staple for a very long time. Uh, Very powerful Cat 2 and hull regen. Um, System AES is another choice. Adaptive Emergency Systems gives you a very powerful Cat 2 bonus. A little bit of damage resistance, not the reason why you slot it. I'm gonna go with Fleet Power Network Array, one of the most meta defining consoles that has come out in the past year. To partner that up with the Volvin console, the subspace fracture tunneling field, which greatly reduces the cooldowns for all of your universal consoles, but in this setup, it's very potent with Fleet Power Network Array because it gives Fleet Power Network Array almost 100% uptime. And Fleet Power Network Array is so great in these builds because it just dramatically increases your firing cycle haste, which just dramatically increases your DPS. To fill out the rest of these slots, some fairly straightforward trait consoles. Yeah, so we have the lithium, transporter from the Credence, also known as the Credence console. It applies a very powerful proc to your energy weapons that does some radiation damage. Also gives you immunity to success offline, which doesn't work with OSS. Gives you no weapons power drain, also extremely strong. Um, and what else we got to slot in? So we have 2 extra slots. Usually you slot something like whatchamacallit. Oh yeah, sorry, really. So anyways, usually you slot something like lore team for a plasma build. Lore team is really good because it gives a subsystem shields offline, a little bit of damage. Has a long activation time. You usually just pop it at the beginning of a TFO. And the other console I usually go with is the Flex Spot. Recently, I've liked the torpedo, the console off the what is it, the Achilles uh, microquantum torpedo flanks array. You fire this off into a group of enemies, and it does just a ton of damage. Um, in this last weapon slot, if you were like on like a coordinated run, which I don't usually do, you'd go with like just like another isomag. You can use another isomag instead of the flanks array, but here, so I do pugs, I'm going to use the Veldor console, uh, shield is absorptive frequency generator. Just this is what gives all CSV builds a lot of tank. Allows you to not rely as heavily on your teammates. You don't need a dedicated tank to do like an ISE, which is the majority of the content that I do. Um, and then for your devices, I don't run meta like I don't run the standard, uh, Kobayashi Maru device and timeline stabilizer. I just don't. Or is it timeline stabilizer? It's the temporal, the Delta one. That I just never bothered getting it. So I usually use three specific devices. The Terrium Surplus. Everyone runs that. Some energy amplifiers and a tech that I've been using a lot recently is the aux battery. Ever since Fleet Power Network Array came out, this has gotten very powerful. There's some synergy with my duty officers to reduce the cooldown so I can juggle between the 2 batteries in a TFO. Um, yeah, so it's basically a straight, forward build. This can be applied to like, I'd say like a third to a half of all the ships in Star Trek the T6 ships, or specifically T6 fleet grade ships in Star Trek Online. Uh, I'll give you some examples of that later on, because I have this loadout saved a bunch of times. Um, so next, I'm going to go over to traits, and I'll start off with starship traits. These are fairly straightforward. It's really use what you have. I have some things, I don't have some other things, and I'll explain some of my picks as I go along. Um, so I go down. Um, Complex classifiers, no question. You put this on a plasma build or a plasma CSV build if you have it. Sometimes you put it on some of the other builds. It doesn't do as much on like a single target build. It does some decent on FA, but it does really well on CSV. Um, Going down some more, you may think I'd slot emergency weapon cycle, but I'm not going to slot it on this build. Um, I just don't like sliding it as much anymore. It's very powerful, but I think that I do slightly more damage with some other starship traits. Scrolling down some more. Um, I'm going to start getting into some of the extremely, meta traits that go on every single build. I like this a lot. Ship of the line provides a very strong Cat 2 crit severity bonus. Um, you have where are you? Temporal tunneling. I'm going to make use of temporal tunneling in this build. It's a stronger firing cycle haste than emergency power cycle. Uh, it's also extremely easy to trigger. Uh, I'll show you how to do that later on. Uh, and then you got your standard 3 traits that are like on every high-end CSV build. You have your tearing goodbye, your ruining of your enemies, and your universal designs. Um, and as I'm going through this, I just realized I'm not going to go with temp tunneling for this. So these are three fairly standard traits. Your turn goodbye gives you a nice 15% crit chance. The accuracy doesn't matter as much, but it's 75% accuracy. The ruin of our enemies just gives you a ton of cat 2. And ISC, you're going to get like 20 to 30 kills. So that's going to give you, you know, 90 to, what is that? I can't do math, but it's 69% damage. Um, the universal design is going to give you, 6% crit chance, 30%, or sorry, 10% crit chance and 50% severity, which is like taking turn goodbye and trips of the line, just smashing them together. It's just an absurd trait, and you have very good uptime with these Volvin builds. You don't need anything like immolating Phaser Lance to make use of it. And then I personally like Thirst of Battle, so I put that in all my builds that use can scatter volley. If you don't know what this does, it's kind of underrated in that it gives you, some cat 1, 40%, but it gives you 190% turn rate and flight speed buff, which is a lot. It makes some harder to maneuver ships much easier to maneuver. Uh, Legendary 7 is not a hard to maneuver ship, but it's just fun, and it doesn't give you too much of a DPS loss compared to sliding like emergency weapon cycle or temporal tunneling. And my final trait, the most obvious one, is Withering Barrage. Just use that on every CSV build. It extends your CSV so that it's 14 seconds instead of 10. Um, and space reputations usually don't change much. Very straightforward. You go crit severity and so cat 2 and control countermeasures, and where are the other ones? Emulating firepower for some cat 2, and then precision for the crit chance, and Talos duality for the crit chance. It's just straightforward. I do that on basically every build I do. Don't think too much about it. There's probably better ways to min-max it, but I don't try to dwell too much on that. Personal space traits is very much the same thing. I just have a set of 11 that I use. Right, that's 11. I don't even know the number of traits. So like I'll scroll through the list and I'll find the ones I like. I'll do Duelist Fervor. Uh, these are all just sources of increased damage. Like Fleet Coordinator, Fragment of AI Tech. You know, um, Intel Handlers, some great crit chance. Intelligent Agent Attaché gives you captain ability cooldowns. They're not as useful as an engineer. Like, so I play mainly engineer, but they do give you, you know, the uh, the engineering ability, which I never remember the name of, that gives you some cat 2. It's still a little extra. Um, attack would make a lot of use of this with go down fighting and attack pattern alpha. Um, I'm not going to go particle manipulator. Sometimes I go particle manipulator just because point blank shot, self-modulating fire, these are all pretty standard stuff. Terran targeting systems, and then you have your Boimler effects for your cooldowns, your unconventional systems for your cooldowns, and for the last trait, I am going to go. I forgot something somewhere. Sometimes I go inspirational leader, but I haven't really been doing that much anymore. Um, I will go. Yeah, you know what? I will go whole lot of X's. Something I've been looking at recently. It gives you a little bit of a little bit of heal and regen. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not. It's not really thematic to this build. You know what? I will just slot in inspirational leader. So yeah, it's fairly standard stuff. It's just you build it up over the years when you just keep on slowly building up your character. You get all these traits. Um, I'm going to save that loadout out before I look at my duty officers. And for the duty officers, these don't change very much ever. Um, Standard two emergency weapon officers, one for crit chance and one for crit severity with energy weapons. I just use the blue ones. Um, I use the Lyrene for the, just some bonus damage against Borg because I only do ISE. Emergency con officer you put on basically every build. Uh, it's just its maneuverability. It just makes the game more fun to play. I use Zero for very much the same reason. I don't see him used a lot, but there's a chance to reduce the cooldown for evasive maneuvers. Um, Usually just always does it, apparently. I've never seen it physically have an impact on my runs. The other option would be to put a Borgdorf in, and I'm not a fan of the Borgdorfs. I don't visually see that change. Like, I like to see visual changes. Um, but the tech that I've been using a lot recently is very rare quartermaster with recharge time for batteries. This is really, really good for aux batteries and being able to juggle between the two battery types. This does not work on advanced batteries. Don't buy it if you want to use it on advanced batteries. Um, these are also fairly rare off of fleet support duty officer packs. I got really lucky with getting this one. Anyways, that's it for like the gear. Um, Bridge officer stations. Like I haven't even looked at these for the most part, except for a little prep for this video. Um, so usually I go with watchers these days. Watchers are very strong because they give you some nice, or versus like SROs because they give you some uh, crit severity, and crit severity is pretty cool. Um, and I have enough crit chance that I don't really mind sacrificing the crit chance that you get off of SROs. Um, so for this slot, I got my Eng Watcher. One of these is Intel, hopefully. Eng Wat 1, where are you? Swap that over to Intel. And for this, it's going to be a little bit out of the ordinary. Uh, what? Oh, this is a common bug. Let me save my loadout. That's why I saved my loadout before. And go to space. And reapply my loadout. Yeah, okay. So, I'm going to do something a little bit out of the ordinary here. And sorry, give me a second to figure out what I was actually doing. Engwat. Okay. Turn my engineer to Intel. I'm going to slot electromagnetic pulse probe 3, EMP3. Instead of like a reverse shield polarity or a mid unstable warp bubble, this is actually a pretty good unconventional proc. I'm going to go with OSS 3, and I'm going to go with Ionic Turbulence 1 with emergency power weapons. And in this slot, I'm going to put another Engineer Watcher, and he's going to go emergency power to engines. And this is where it gets a little, it's pretty straightforward. This is a fairly common set of bridge officers on a lot of ships. So I'm not going to use this universal for Miracle Worker. I'm going to use it for science. So I'm going to take my Psi Watcher, if I can find him, and we're going to go Gravity Well 1, Photonic Officer 1, and Tractor Beam 1. This is a very standard bridge officer setup. A lot of ships run it, a lot of people run it. Gravity Well 1's a pull. Doesn't really work as well if you're not invested into Control X. It's an unconventional proc. It's probably like the best unconventional proc. It's not temporal. Tractor Beam is an unconventional proc. Has a very limited range, but it gets the job done. And Photonic Officer, you don't have to slot this with Boimler. I like the consistency of it, so more times than not, I just slot it for the hell of it. Um, my TAC Officer slot, this is going to be very straightforward. I'm going to grab one of my TAC watchers, and I'm going to go CSV2, Beta 1, and in this build it'll be Chemosite 1. If I was using uh, temporal tunneling, I'd use best served cold 1 here. You use best served cold. I use best served cold 1 because it's a 15-second cooldown, and temporal tunneling lasts 15 seconds, and it procs temporal tunneling, so you get really good uptime. So like you activate temporal tunneling on your target as you go into like a transformer or a gate or a cube, but Chemosite will be used here because I don't use temporal tunneling. And on this last slot, I'm going to go science. Usually, you'd have a special slot um, in this situation, but I am fine with just using a watcher here with scramble sensors and gem targeting sensors. So that would give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 universal or unconventional systems procs. I like to get that like 4 to 7 unconventional systems procs in my build, and that's it. You could get, like different builds, like the um, some other ships, like if you have like a temporal primary, you could probably get like 7 out of it. Like I wouldn't slot if this was like a temporal seed, I wouldn't slot Chemosite. Um, yeah, so that's basically my bridge officer slots, and I'm gonna now spend some time configuring my tray because I'm going to demonstrate this in an ISE for you. So I'm back again. Set up my tray. While I was setting up my tray, I realized I forgot a console. I've substituted the Achilles torpedo console for the Agony redistributor. Pretty staple in DPS builds. I just thought over it when setting the build up. Um, So basically, to walk through my how I have my tray layout set up, I have slot trays rows 9 and 10 for my spacebar. I don't really put much on my spacebar these days, just my firing cycle, my firing mode, my beta, my chemosite, my emergency powers, and my photonic officer. My tray executes left to right, always guarantees that order. And then on tray 8, I have my what I call my fleet power network array or buff tray. I go with the credence console and then DPRM and then AES and then my 4 like button combo for fleet power network array, my secondary battery, uh, the Eng captain's ability, which gives you some ox and weapon power as well as some bonus weapon damage. It doesn't really have a huge impact. Intel team, and then I have Nadion inversion. Usually I use it at the wrong time. Ideally, you should use it after Credence console expires. And then on my second, these are more damage dealing universal consoles, and I always have Focus Frenzy here. But two main consoles here are going to be Agony and Lore Team. Yeah, and then on tray 8 is my uncon tray, where I have the Volvin console and then all my uncons. Uh, Usually order them in the order which I like to use them. Um, yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. I have my for because I'm a cruiser commands. I'm using weapon systems efficiency, and then I have some just your rep clickies for some a little bit of damage and some extra sustainability. Usually don't need to use them. And then I have my maneuverability abilities in the corner. Um, should set my weapon power. So for weapon power levels, for these builds, you go max weapons and then max engines. And you don't max aux because you're going to get more than enough aux between uh, aux battery, EPS, override subsystem safeties. Um, so earlier I mentioned attaché. Attaché is mainly used to get your EPS down, so you can use it a couple of times in a run. Let me see if I can get a ISE going, and if I somehow fail this one, you will see a jump cut to an actual run that is like not bad. And they call me, the Q dodger for a reason. If I don't like how something goes, I'm just gonna leave, and it's pretty toxic of me, but it happens. So here, basically, I don't have a prep phase necessarily. I just activate abilities, um, and I just use my spacebar. Like I don't put too much effort into it. Gets me the ship the line procs up. Could get you some inspirational leader procs. Not anything to write home about. And then at 20, usually you activate lower team. I'm not paying attention, so I activated it at like 15. At 8, I usually activate evasive, and then on 6, I usually start activating my abilities, to pre-fire the important ones. And then at 0, you go in, fire all, activate agony. Um, I don't activate Volvid on initial phase or any of my uncons. And we just go and we just kill and we just do the TFO. And then after cube dies, either you have evasive or you don't. And then here I'll volve in, start activating my uncons. And usually you want to do front flank, but I don't really care too much about flank in these builds. And then, target dies, move over, tag some middle, go over here. I usually have Volvin down, start activating my universal consoles again. And I don't care too much about abilities. I usually activate Agony here. Find a telephone. Sometimes I'll just throw some stuff out, not thinking too much about it. And some more uncons. And if I do get, tempted by a little bit of damage, I usually, handle things. There's no one gravity welling, so I'll take out some of the stuff first. And then once I start taking damage, I'll do some more shit console stuff, activate Volvins, snap over to behind the cube, trigger some more stuff, activates, so some fairly, when things go off cooldown, I usually just press them, not the end of the world. As I'm explaining this, I'm a little delayed on my transition over, Wolven Agony, OSS, a little bit of DPRM going on. I'll just plot my shields. And yeah, it's a pretty straightforward run. Not a lot to complain about, and just wait until the cube dies. And that's basically the run. Pretty straightforward. I did 1 million DPS. And that 1 million DPS is pretty straight, like, you can get that pretty consistently on any build these sets of abilities can go on. You don't necessarily need an Intel primary. This works very well on Intel secondary ships as well. You don't necessarily need, a battle cruiser or anything. Pretty straightforward stuff. I'm going to now transition to my bridge and try to explain how this build can be applied to some different ships. So here I have a whole bunch of ships. For example, if I take the Atlantis. Atlantis is a fantastic ship. Do I have a layout for plasma on it? I don't. Use the Credence as an example. Credence is a fantastic ship, doesn't have Intel at all on it. Let me ready that and look at my layout. You'll see very much the same thing. Got the plasma cannons. You got the same exact deflector, impulse, warp, and shields. You got very much the same console layout, except there is one extra isomag because it's a miracle worker ship. You look at the stations. It's more or less the same thing. A little bit different when it comes to uncon procs because I have more of them, but you'll see the same exact thing. I run, EPTW1, EPTE1, CSV, CSP beta, and Chemosite. I have that Photonic Officer. Here I don't use Gravity Well, I have Timeline Collapse, and then the standard uncon traits you'd use for Temporal. I could go, select a different ship. Do I have a Centaur layout for this? I do. And Centaur is not really a ship you'd ever expect on cannons. Um, but if I swap to it, very much the same thing. You see, I bring it up this here. You got the cannons, the same exact decks. You got the cannons. 5 ISO mags, similar to the Credence, almost identical. It's like it's the exact same ship layout. And you look at the traits, it's very similar. In this case, I have weapons 3 and engines 1. I have less uncon procs because this is an older iteration of the build. I only have the 2. I have the 3 with a warp bubble. This, if I were to this ship's a little bit difficult in that you have that 4th engineer slot. It's harder to think about a build around this. Something that I would do now is I would go with Warp Plasma 1 and Weapons 1, but very much the similar layout, except you get CSV 1. It's pretty fun stuff to do, and you could go temporal tunneling and do something like Best Red Cold. And I could explain this some more. It's not just plasma builds that make use of this kind of cookie cutter layout, but show you another plasma build. Very popular in some of my pug runs I do is the Friendship. Sorry, Ready. It has a very similar vibe going on here. Cannons, plasma cannons, plasma cannons. A little deviation here where I do this for the 3-piece and I use the Kinnemer shield. We got 4 ISO mags and we have the same exact set of consoles. All these ships have the same thing. Friendship is interesting in that you can do Type 7s. You look at the bridge officer setup. It's very similar to the D7 I just talked about. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 uncons. You have your emergency powers. You have your cannon, scatter volley, your beta, and your chemosite. And this is special in that you have Suppression Barrage 3. Very powerful ship. I could go and keep on doing examples of this, but I think you get the picture. Another thought, Plasma's not the only my viable or meta, layout. The same exact build strategy. I have a setup on the Atlantis, which is I'll show you the Veldor version of it. It's very much the same thing, but it's with phaser. I use some phasers here. I got some radiolytics, some phasers. That same exact, you know, deflector, impulse, warp, and shields. Same exact console style, except I only have 4 ISO mags. And I use the torpedo console. And I use this instead of Eldor. It's interesting. This console's interesting. It deserves its own discussion. Once I have some more thoughts with it. Um, but yeah, it's just all the build the same exact thing. You have your 3 tack slots that you always slot, and then you do the emergency powers, and then your photonic officer, and then the rest of it's all uncons. Like you would be surprised the amount of ships that can slot like a layout that's very much like this. Like I was having a experiment a while ago with the Baltum. Like who flies the Baltum? It's just a very obscure I think it's like pilot ship. I don't. I might use Clean Getaway on it. Yeah, I use Clean Getaway on it. It's not the end of the world. You got like the same exact thing I did with the Atlantis, but with covert phasers. Same exact, deflector engine setup. For ISO mags. Uh, Almost the exact same universal console slot layout, except I was experimenting with ambush gateway generator. Um, you look at, the bridge officer slots. This one has 4 is I'm using on Phaser, I typically use temporal tunneling. You got your four tacks, and then you have your two engineers with emergency powers, and then the rest of it's just like OSS and unconventional systems procs. All these ships work the same exact way, and I'm going a little fast because it's just a very specific way of thinking about the game. So like when people say, "Oh, I want to use insert ship here. Give me a build for it." It's like, well, you could just look at any other ship, any other build, like Canon build. They all function the same exact way. Um, and even like you go over here and it's the same exact traits. It's just a way of thinking, and you just apply that way of thinking. And then maybe a new console comes out, a new trait comes out that you may want to go in and out of things. Prior to temporal tunneling, you'd use like emergency weapon cycle. Um, yeah, I mean that's basically all I wanted to do. I did this in a couple of parts. I'm gonna have to figure out how to splice them together. There was a very annoying motorcycle. But yeah, I hope someone finds this helpful. I've been speaking for like 30 minutes maybe. Um, yeah, uh, if you've listened to this far into the video, I don't usually do these. I'm not a content creator. Well, I mean, I'm not a traditional content creator like a YouTuber, but I maintain Oscar, the open source combat log reader. I appreciate everyone who uses it and gives me feedback. Can't work on it full time, but I do what I can when I can. Um, yeah, and that's it. Thank you for watching.